You ever have a moment where you can still hear the words, even decades later? It was the 4th of July. Most kids my age were grilling burgers, blowing stuff up, flirting with girls down at the lake. Me? I was standing in my childhood driveway, holding a trash bag full of clothes and listening to my dad yell, "Get out of my house and don't come back till you're a man." I was 18. Now I wasn't perfect. Far from it. I'd mouthed off. I'd skipped a couple classes, but I wasn't out stealing cars or hurting people. I was just a kid who didn't know where he fit in. My grades weren't terrible. I held down 2 part-time jobs, but none of that mattered once my stepmom decided I was a threat to the household. She didn't like the way I looked at her after she threw away my mom's old photo album. That was the last straw for her. And my dad? He chose her over me, without flinching. I remember the way the screen door slammed behind him. I could still hear the fireworks cracking over the hills as I walked away. For the next few weeks, I slept in my beat-up Toyota Corolla. I'd drive to the edge of town, crack the windows open, and count the streetlights until I fell asleep. I showered at a gym that still had coin-operated lockers, ate from vending machines, cried quietly, hoping nobody heard. The shame? It cut deeper than hunger. Because when you're 18, kicked out, and completely alone, it doesn't matter how tough you act. You feel like trash, discarded, and no one called. Not my father, not my stepmom, not even my older cousin who I thought of like a brother. It was a recruiter's flyer that saved me. I found it on the windshield one morning, probably left by some guy walking through the Walmart parking lot. "Be all you can be," it said, real original. But on the back, a note in pen. "We feed you, we train you, we make you stronger. Show up Monday." I still don't know who wrote that, but I showed up. Boot camp didn't feel like salvation. It felt like hell. The first 3 days, I nearly quit 5 different times. But every time I wanted to throw in the towel, I thought of that driveway, of my father's face, of the way my stepmom smirked as the door slammed. So I stayed. I made it through basic, barely. I still remember Sergeant Kelton, tough old vet with a gravel voice and a scar on his neck. He pulled me aside after week 6 and said, "You're not the biggest, you're not the fastest, but you're too damn stubborn to quit. That might be enough." That line stuck with me. Stubborn was the only thing I had left. Years passed. I deployed twice. Once to Iraq, once to Afghanistan. I worked logistics, convoy coordination, stuff that didn't make headlines but kept people alive. I didn't save the world, but I did my job, and I did it well. Somewhere along the way, I started getting promoted. Corporal, then sergeant, then staff sergeant. I learned to lead, not because I was the smartest guy in the room, but because I knew how to listen. I knew what it was like to feel small, to feel unwanted, and I made damn sure no man under my command ever felt that way. But I never told anyone back home. I didn't send photos, didn't write letters. My name showed up in a few promotions lists in local papers, but I doubted they even saw them. My family? I wasn't on their radar anymore. I disappeared. Until one day, about 8 years later, I came back to town for a funeral. My grandmother, the only person who ever hugged me longer than a second, had passed. I flew in, dressed in my army blues. The wake was small, held in the old church I used to sneak naps in as a boy. That's when I saw them. My father and stepmom, standing near the punch table like nothing had ever happened. My father's eyes met mine. He blinked. Hard. "Son," he said, like the word physically hurt him. "Staff sergeant," I corrected him. I didn't go to the family dinner afterward. I didn't want small talk, but word spread quickly. Suddenly, I was getting Facebook messages from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. My cousin even sent a group selfie saying, "So proud of our boy." I ignored them all. You'd think that'd be the end of it, but it was only the beginning. Because a year later, I got a call from my cousin, the one who never checked in when I was homeless, the one who posted family first quotes every Thanksgiving. "Hey," he said, like we were best friends. "So Dad's been sick, real bad, and they're gonna lose the house. Thought maybe you could help." I almost laughed, but I didn't, because something inside me had changed. And it's what happened next that truly shocked me. I'll never forget that phone call. It was late. I just wrapped up a training session at Fort Hood. My boots were still dusty from the field. I was eating leftover chili out of a plastic bowl in the barracks when my phone lit up. Cousin Tim. I stared at the screen a second longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to toss the phone across the room, but something about the timing, the silence in the air, made me answer. "Hey man, how you been?" he said. No apology, no acknowledgement of the years of silence. Just straight into awkward small talk, like we were catching up after a summer break. I stayed quiet. Then came the pitch. "Dad's in rough shape. Cancer. It's spread. They're behind on the mortgage. House is gonna be foreclosed. And, I told them maybe you could help, since you've done well for yourself." I almost dropped the phone. You know that saying, people will treat you like you're invisible until they need something from you? Yeah, that hit home real fast. But I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just asked one thing. Why now? There was a long pause. Then Tim said something I'll never forget. "Because you're the only one in this family who ever figured things out." I didn't answer right away. I told him I'd think about it. And for the next 48 hours, I wrestled with it. This was the man who used to make fun of my cheap clothes. The same cousin who once called me dead weight behind my back. The one who left me standing outside his apartment in the rain when I was 19 and had nowhere to go. And now, he wanted me to swoop in and save the day? But there's something about the military that changes you. You stop thinking like a victim. You start thinking like a leader. And I realized this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about choosing the kind of man I wanted to be. So I made a decision. I called the bank, I paid the late fees, brought the mortgage current, even set up a monthly payment plan under my name. Quietly. No thanks needed. I told Tim to keep my name out of it. He didn't. A week later, I started getting texts from people I hadn't spoken to in decades. "Amazing what you did for Uncle Joe. You've got such a big heart, man. Always knew you'd go far." Right. Always. But here's the kicker. My father never called. Not even once. 2 months later, I got leave and drove back to town. Not for a reunion. Not for closure. I had a VA appointment nearby and figured I'd stop by the house I was now paying for, just to see if they were even keeping it clean. I pulled up in my Silverado, sat there for a moment in the driveway. The same spot where I stood at 18 with a trash bag over my shoulder. It was surreal. Grass was overgrown, paint was peeling, but it was still standing. I walked up to the door and knocked. My stepmother opened it. She froze. The color drained from her face. "You," she said. I didn't smile, didn't scowl. I just nodded. "Is he home?" I asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. My father was sitting in his old recliner, oxygen tube in his nose, watching a black and white Western. The same shows he used to yell at me for interrupting. He looked older, smaller, fragile. He glanced up. "You came," he said softly. I didn't answer. "Wasn't sure if I'd see you again," he added. Still, I didn't answer. He reached for the remote and paused the TV. I heard, "You're the reason we still have this house." That caught me off guard. I'd expected a lot. Awkwardness, silence, maybe even defiance. But not that. "Is that true?" he asked. I shrugged. "Guess it doesn't matter, does it?" He looked down at his hands, cracked and pale. "I was hard on you," he said. "No," I corrected. "You threw me out. There's a difference." Silence again. Then he did something I wasn't ready for. He cried. Real tears. Not the kind you fake when the pastor's watching, but the deep, quiet tears of a man who knows time is running out and regrets are piling up. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he whispered. "I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd either break or get stronger." "Well," I said, "you were half right." We sat there a long time, not speaking, just breathing the same stale air, the hum of the oxygen machine the only sound in the room. Eventually, I stood up to leave. Before I could walk out, he said one more thing. "I'm proud of you, son." I turned, looked him dead in the eye, and replied, "I didn't do it for you." Then I walked out. Driving away from that house, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter either. I just felt free. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need an apology. And I didn't need them to understand the man I'd become. I just needed to know. I'd never be that scared kid on the porch again. After I left my father's house that day, something inside me shifted. I had always carried this weight, this invisible rucksack filled with rejection, anger, and the constant need to prove myself. But that moment, that final conversation, it let me unpack some of it. Not all, but enough to stand taller. I went back to base and buried myself in work. My unit was prepping for joint training with NATO forces, and logistics coordination was a beast. We had pallets to track, fuel routes to reroute, and timelines that changed daily. But I thrived in the chaos. There's something beautiful about knowing your job keeps others safe, even if they never know your name. You're not in the spotlight, but without you, the mission falls apart. That became my specialty, keeping things together quietly. Funny how life works. While I was busy managing gear for international exercises, word back home kept trickling in. Apparently, my cousin had told everyone, the Army made me rich. Not true. I wasn't driving Ferraris or lighting cigars with $100 bills, but I was smart with money. I'd used my housing allowance wisely, took a few night courses on finance, even started investing small, index funds, rental property, nothing flashy. I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it because I remembered what it felt like to sleep in a car with $12 to your name. By the time I hit my 30s, I had 2 rental homes and a solid credit score. One of my tenants? A single mom who reminded me of my own mother. Quiet strength, always working double shifts. I charged her less than market rate. She cried the day I renewed her lease without raising rent. That did more for me than any medal. You see, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted redemption, not for them, but for the kid I used to be. The one nobody helped. I wanted to be the man I needed when I was 18. Around that time, I got tapped for warrant officer candidate school. It was a huge step. meant more responsibility, more hours, more pressure. But it also meant I was no longer just Staff Sergeant McCall. I was becoming someone who commanded real respect across the ranks. I remember the day I got my first salute as a W01. The soldier didn't know me, didn't know my past, didn't care that I once slept in a Walmart parking lot. He just saw the uniform, the rank, and he saluted. That moment, it broke me. I walked back to my quarters and cried for 10 minutes. People think military life is all toughness and stoicism. But what they don't see are the quiet moments. The coffee at 3 a.m. in the motor pool. The letters from kids that smell like crayons. The long walks after a tough mission where you realize you're not just fighting for your country. You're fighting to be whole again. I was healing, slowly. But then came the letter. It was from my half-sister, Jenna. I hadn't spoken to her since she was 12. Back then, she'd clung to our stepmom like a lifeline and followed her lead in icing me out. But now she was in her 20s, married, 2 kids. Her letter was handwritten, messy, nervous penmanship. I don't know if you'll read this. I probably don't deserve to ask anything, but I wanted you to know I always missed you. I just didn't know how to say it back then. Mom wouldn't let me. Dad never talked about you, but I've followed your career. I'm proud of you. I tell my kids about you. Uncle James, the soldier. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm sorry. I hope one day we can talk. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up and put it in my locker, right next to a photo of my boot camp platoon. I didn't respond. Not right away. Forgiveness takes time. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because part of me was still learning how to let go. A month later, I ran into a younger private, new recruit from a tough background. Parents both gone, raised in the system, angry at the world. I saw myself in him immediately. He was messing up, missing roll call, picking fights, flunking his PT. Most people wanted to ship him out. I didn't. Instead, I pulled him aside, took him under my wing, got him set up with a counselor, helped him open a bank account, taught him how to use Excel to track expenses, showed him how to lift weights without hurting himself. He fought me every step of the way. But after a few months, he started showing up on time, saluted with pride, even called me sir without sarcasm. One night, he asked me, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." I smiled. Because once, someone left me out in the cold, and I promised myself I'd never do the same to someone who was still figuring life out. That was the first time I said it out loud. The first time I realized my story wasn't just about survival. It was about service, leadership, quiet impact, and I wasn't done yet. By the time I hit 38, I had something most men my age didn't. Clarity. Not money, not fame. Just a clear picture of who I was and who I never wanted to be again. I had a reputation on base, the kind that doesn't come from shouting or showing off, but from doing the hard things right, over and over. Soldiers came to me when they didn't know who else to trust. Officers pulled me into closed-door meetings when they needed problems solved without drama. I wasn't just another guy in uniform anymore. I was a problem solver, a protector, a quiet anchor in the storm. Then one day, I got an email that nearly knocked me out of my chair. Subject: Veterans Leadership Summit, keynote invitation. It wasn't spam. It was from a retired general I'd only met once, years ago, at a logistics conference. He remembered my talk about managing supply chains during sandstorms in Kandahar. Apparently, that presentation had made the rounds. Someone had quoted me in an Army Reserve training manual. News to me. Now, They wanted me to be the keynote speaker at a summit in Washington, D.C. Me, the kid who once slept in his car behind a diner. I almost said no. Imposter syndrome is real, even for someone who's survived mortar fire and political minefields. But my CO gave me a look and said, "You've earned this. It's your turn to speak up." So I said yes, and I wrote that speech the way I lived my life. No fluff, no fiction. Just truth. I stood up in front of a room full of suits and stars and said, "You don't always get to choose your family, but you can always choose your future." I told them about the night I left home with a trash bag, about boot camp, about the kid in my unit who almost washed out and now runs his own logistics firm, about forgiveness, not because it's easy, but because bitterness is too heavy to carry in a rucksack. After the speech, people lined up to shake my hand. Some took notes. A few had tears in their eyes. But one face in the crowd caught me off guard. My sister, Jenna. She'd come all the way to D.C. with her husband and 2 kids. I hadn't seen her in nearly 20 years. She waited until the room cleared, then walked up, wringing her hands the way she did when she was a nervous kid. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said, "but I needed to hear this. I think I've needed to hear this for a long time." We went out for coffee, talked for hours. She told me how hard it had been growing up in that house after I left, how no one talked about me, like I'd just vanished, how our father never mentioned my name again, not even once, even as his health declined. "I used to listen outside their bedroom door," she confessed. "I wanted to hear him say he missed you. He never did. But I did. I missed you every day." I believed her, not because she cried, but because something in her eyes had changed. Time has a way of humbling us all. We started talking more after that. Phone calls, holiday cards. Eventually, I visited her home in Raleigh, met my niece and nephew. She even invited me to speak at her kids' school for Veterans Day. I stood in front of a classroom full of wide-eyed 4th graders and told them, "Being strong doesn't mean being loud. Sometimes it just means showing up every day and doing what's right, even when no one claps." The teacher cried. My niece gave me a crayon drawing that said, "My uncle is a hero." I kept it in my breast pocket the entire ride back to base, but the calls didn't stop coming. Cousins, second cousins, old classmates who once called me a loser. Now they were reaching out like I was the golden boy. Apparently, word had gotten out that I paid off my dad's mortgage, and then later helped my aunt refinance hers when she got scammed by some reverse mortgage crooks. I wasn't trying to be anyone's savior, but when you grow up tossed out like garbage, you start seeing value where others don't. You start protecting people no one else thinks to defend. One day, my sister called in tears. She'd found out that our dad had passed, peacefully, alone, in his recliner. No funeral planned, no church booked, just a notice in the local paper and an unpaid cremation bill. "Do we do something?" she asked. I sat with that question a long time. Part of me wanted to walk away, but a bigger part, the part forged through years of service, duty, and quiet sacrifice, knew what I had to do. I flew back to our hometown, paid the cremation bill, held a small memorial. Nothing fancy, just a few chairs, some old photos, and a folded flag I'd kept from my last deployment. When the preacher asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, I stood. My father taught me 2 things. First, how to survive when no one's got your back. Second, how to become the kind of man who shows up, even when no one else will. Then I sat down, not a dry eye in the room. After the memorial, something strange started happening. I wasn't just that guy who helps his family now. I was getting emails from people I'd never met. Sons of old army buddies, nonprofit leaders, even a few high school classmates who once ignored me. They wanted to hear my story. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was real. One message stood out. It came from a sergeant I barely remembered, a guy I trained with years back in Georgia. "Sir, I never told you this, but you saved my life. That time you noticed I skipped chow 3 days in a row, and you made me sit down and eat while you sat across from me. That was the first time someone cared since my brother died. I got help after that. I'm still in uniform today because of you." I sat in my kitchen reading that one, hands trembling a little. You never know which small action changes someone else's course. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a veterans job transition workshop. 100 men and women, some in suits, some still wearing camo jackets out of habit, sat in folding chairs, wondering how they were supposed to start over at 45, 55, even 60. I stepped up to the mic and opened with this. "I once got kicked out of my house with nothing but a trash bag. Now I pay the mortgage for the people who slammed the door in my face. If I can rebuild from that, you can rebuild from anything." The room went still. Then someone clapped. Then more. By the end, people lined up not for autographs, but just to shake my hand. Some just wanted to say thank you. Some were crying, and I realized my pain had become someone else's roadmap. Not long after that, my sister Jenna called me again. "Hey," she said, "I know it's crazy, but would you consider coming to the family reunion this year?" I almost choked on my coffee. "The one I haven't been invited to in 20 years? "Yeah," she said. "It's different now. People have changed. They've seen who you are. Or who I've become without them," I said quietly. She didn't argue, but she added, "Maybe this time you'll be seen with them." I didn't give her an answer right away, but curiosity got the best of me. So a month later, I drove out to the reunion, rented a basic Airbnb nearby, brought my own cooler just in case. I wasn't expecting red carpets, but when I showed up, people actually clapped. Not a big standing ovation or anything. Just a few folks near the BBQ pit who stood up and said, "There he is, the one who made us all proud." Proud. That word had been missing from my family vocabulary for so long, I forgot what it felt like to hear it directed at me. My cousin Tim, yes, that Tim, came up and shook my hand. No snark, no fake smiles, just a simple, "I was wrong about you. Always was." I nodded. "Yeah, you were." And then, we talked. Not about the past, not about the pain, but about how his daughter wanted to join the Navy. About how his mortgage was still being paid by a mysterious family sponsor he pretended not to know about. I let him have that. Sometimes quiet revenge is letting people live comfortably, knowing they don't deserve it, but giving it anyway. Later that night, as the fire pit cracked and the kids played flashlight tag in the yard, my niece handed me a marshmallow on a stick. "You're the coolest uncle," she said. I smiled. "No," I told her. "I'm just the one who stuck around." That night, I looked around the yard and realized something wild. The kid who got thrown out now funded the roof over their heads. And yet, I didn't feel smug. I felt calm, like a chapter had finally closed. Back at work, the Army had other plans. I was now being floated as a candidate for a senior civilian logistics advisory role, one that came with a corner office, a government pension, and the kind of influence I never dreamed I'd hold when I was scrubbing Humvees as a recruit. I said yes, retired from active duty after 20 honorable years. and walked into that new role with my head high. A few weeks into the job, I was invited to help redesign the Transition Assistance Program for service members exiting into civilian life. They asked what changes I'd make. I said, "Start by teaching them that your past doesn't define your ceiling. Your mindset does." Then I wrote it down on the whiteboard and left it there. No one erased it. By then, my network had grown. I was mentoring young vets, donating quietly to military families in need, helping older soldiers refinance their homes. But I never bragged, never posted photos of checks or speeches or flag ceremonies. Why? Because true power doesn't need to shout. It just moves. Quietly. Consistently. And eventually, it lifts everyone around it. It's strange how life has a way of circling back. I started out as a kid nobody wanted, a kid whose name wasn't spoken at family dinners, a kid who slept in his car and hoped no one saw. And somehow, I became the one they call when the roof leaks, when the bank calls, or when someone needs to figure out how to get a kid through trade school. I became the one who pays the bills, the one who brings the calm, the one they now call uncle, brother, even sir. I didn't do it out of duty. I didn't do it out of guilt. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I knew what it felt like to be alone, and I swore no one else, at least not on my watch, would have to feel that forgotten. Now, I wake up in a modest home I bought with VA benefits, American flag on the porch, coffee pot brewing before 6 a.m., and I keep a bulletin board in my home office, full of photos, a picture of me and my niece after her high school graduation, a thank you card from a soldier I mentored, my first military ID next to my retirement plaque, and right in the center, a folded napkin with a quote I scribbled down years ago during a bad storm in Kandahar. You don't need to be remembered by everyone. You just need to matter to someone. That became my code. I never made headlines. I never got a statue. I never went viral. But I mattered. To the kid in the barracks. To the cousin who needed a second chance. To the strangers I'll never meet who get a warm bed because I covered the rent behind the scenes. That's legacy. Not long ago, I got a letter from a young soldier I helped transition to civilian life. He runs his own small trucking company now, hires vets, trains them, gives them second chances, just like I got. He ended the letter with, "I thought I was broken. You showed me I was just untested." That one hit deep. Because if I had believed my father, if I had believed my past, I'd still be in that parking lot, staring up at the stars, wondering why I wasn't enough. But I didn't believe the lie. I believed in something else. That struggle doesn't make you small, it makes you sharp. So here's the truth, plain and simple. If you're watching this and thinking, I was kicked out, counted out, told I'd never be anything, I've been there, and I'm telling you right now, you are not your worst day. You are not your past. You are not their opinion. You are who you choose to become next. And no matter where you started, you can become the one who pays the mortgage, the one who shows up, the one they never saw coming, but couldn't ignore once you arrived. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing so much. They have no choice but to respect the person you became. That's not revenge. That's victory. Quiet. Steady. Unshakable. If this story meant something to you, if you saw a little of yourself in my journey, please hit that like button, subscribe for more true stories of resilience and redemption, and drop a comment below. Where were you when someone gave up on you? And how did you rise anyway? Let's remind each other we're never too far gone to make a comeback.